OK/X/, this was a while ago, and I posted here about this already, but I'm thinking about heading up to the area again, and I want to be prepared this time. Anyway, for some details. Roughly 1990s. Quite a fan of big game and travel from flyover state to flyover state just to hunt some cougars or just about anything that makes me feel like a man. Fairly successful, and had a few close calls, many just involving being seen by a big cat, or on a trip to Africa I got a bit manhandled by a gorilla. So in essence I would consider myself a thrill hunter. Because of all the hunts I have been on, the only thing I ever bring home is meat for consumption or a new rifle and few good stories. Anyway, I'm on a hunt in western PA, my home state. Just plucking around for deer, sitting in a tree stand thinking about how I can afford to get out on my next big trip. So naturally I'm getting antsy just before lunch and I decide to start walking around. The snow is that real crunchy shit you only get after it thaws and refreezes, so walking quietly is downright not happening. Because of this I shoulder my 3006 and decide to just enjoy the views of PA, because I sure as hell ain't sneaking up on anything. I slowly fall into the rhythm of listening to my feet crunch the snow a few times, then stopping, scanning and repeating. I eventually get to that point where you know you are about to sweat, so I found a nice fallen tree and sat down, hoping to avoid getting soaked with soon-to-freeze sweat. Sit down and work on breathing slowly while looking around. Sweats still come and I feel like I'm being roasted alive in my heavy coat. As I sit there I get more and more flustered, my breathing won't slow down and I'm sweating like a madman. I catch my eyes flicking from side to side even though I don't hear or see anything. During all of this my heart is beating out of my chest, and I can barely keep myself still. The only noise I can hear is my damn heart at this point, and I'm about to start praying that I'm not having a heart attack. Is 30 too early to have a heart attack? I remember thinking. The sound of my heart suddenly cuts off and I'm left in the middle of the open PA forest in dead silence. It feels like someone pulled this claustrophobic box off of me, and for the first time since the panic attack I can see stuff more than 10 feet from me. That's when I hear the birds start up again. I hadn't even realized the birds were quiet. I didn't think much of it at the time. I made it back to the small lodge for lunch, telling myself that I should warm up and put on a new undershirt after all that. For some reason after I finish lunch I found my eyes darting around again. Without warning the sweats start up again and I get all flustered. I spent the next few minutes genuinely contemplating driving to a hospital and explaining to the physician on why I think I was having hot flashes despite not being woman, nor experiencing menopause. I settle with calling it a day and getting a good night's sleep. Sleep goes fine and the next morning I feel like $1,000,000. Grab my rifle and gear and head out to the tree stand at the ass crack of dawn. It's still pretty dark. When I get to my tree stand the entire place is covered in tracks, I mean, if you can even call them that. The snow in a 10-foot radius around my stand is dug up and all the snow is overturned. It was dark, and I really was just ready to settle in, but the tracks were weird and piqued my interest. While it made sense I couldn't find a distinct print in the center, I couldn't find a single distinct hoof print near the edges either. Now this wasn't the only time deer have made a mockery of my hunting places, so I just figured a whole bunch of deer had came by, found my scent, and expressed their displeasure by stamping to try and get me to show up. Deer do this more than you would think. Whatever, at least deer are here. I headed up the ladder, trying my best not to eat shit while climbing as my boots are slipping all over the place. Get settled in, and sit for another 4 hours before I decide to change things up. As I'm almost all the way down the tree stand's rungs I misplace my foot on the last step and fall on my ass. Cussing and swearing I pick myself up and look at the last rung of the ladder. Bloody deer velvet was all over it. It takes me a few moments to pull this shit off the ladder and it comes off in pig pieces, naturally getting blood all over my hands, but thankfully I had the peace of mind to take off my gloves to avoid dirtying them. Looking at the semi-bloody mess, something looks weird about the deer velvet. I shake off the feeling and decide to go down to the lake at the bottom of the valley to wash my hands off, it being more of an excuse to just get up and move. It feels good moving around again, and with my gloves off I don't feel like I'm overheating. That's when I got down to where the creek meets the lake. God, what a sight! The way the sun hits the semi-frozen water, beautiful. It took me a few minutes to wash the blood off my hands, mostly because I couldn't stop admiring the scenery while I warmed my hands in between dips. After a while I decided to start making my way around the lake, just to give me a reason to stay there longer. It takes nearly 45 minutes to get most of the way around, and I stop to take a breather. Looking across the water I suddenly feel hot again. Entire body goes panic mode, including heavy sweating. Start to think it was my shitty cholesterol catching up to me. That's when the echoes of the birds stopped in a wave, the far away chirping becoming alarmed, them falling silent as the warning call reverberated along the edges of the lake. I have never, and I mean never, heard a warning call result in this kind of silence. For a hawk, or some aerial predator. Sure, maybe a call would go out to alert the other birds, but this was eerie. I just thank my lucky stars that I heard it this time. Looking across the lake I saw something big coming out from under some low-growing pines. I had to be at least 300 yards from this thing, but looking at it had me frozen. Its back was a dark color, or maybe it was just the shadows cast on it, but its general frame was still visible. At first I think cougar, but I don't think I would be sweating bullets for a mildly large cat. Keep looking. Brain actually starts working again and I realize I have a scope on my rifle. I try to move. Nothing. Eyes locked on this thing across the lake. It makes its way out to the water, its face bathed in sunlight for the first time. I nearly choke at the sight of it. Not a cougar. Fug this. Its face was too long for a cougar, its jaws extending too far out from its face. Its front legs were too long and sinewy. I couldn't take my eyes off of it, let alone move. I watch as it makes its way to the water, expecting it to drink. It keeps its face close to the ground as it pads towards the edge. The thing barely hesitates at the water before making its way around the perimeter of the water, all the way keeping its head close to the ground. I feel the blood drain out of my face as I realized where it was. It had come out of the same place I was roughly 30 minutes ago. Something felt wrong. Really wrong. When you see big game you get an exciting feeling, at least I do. For a second you lock eyes and think. Either of us could be prey if the other makes a wrong move, and it's exhilarating. When I looked at this thing I knew there was only one predator here, and it definitely was not me. The gun on my back felt way too small all of a sudden. As if on cue the thing pulled its head up. It scanned along the lakeside. I didn't waste any time waiting for it to see me. I ran, because something told me that was all I could do. For minutes the only noise was my feet crushing through the snow. I knew that if it followed my scent it would take the long way around the lake, so the moment I made it behind the tree line I started booking it, running straight for the cabin, my only hope being getting back to the cabin before it covered the distance between us. That's when I heard it again. The sound of birds, but behind me. I stopped, and did the smartest thing I have ever done in my life. I listened. Dead silence ahead. Birds behind. The thing had doubled back to cut off my escape route. I didn't have time to think about how smart it was. I took off away from the lake, a new direction altogether. 10 minutes, 30 minutes, I don't know, but as seconds ticked by I felt like the distance between us was nearly gone. I was getting desperate. That's when I saw one of the landmarks I used for navigating the area. A small collection of shale that had broken off of the mountain and formed a small cave against the cliffside. Everything screamed at me to get inside, and as I dove into the crawl space probably no wider than my shoulders, I felt like I was about to be dragged out by my legs at any moment. Frantically I pulled myself into it. Every second that a millimeter of me was outside of this space made me feel vulnerable. By some miracle the crawl space opened up into a larger space, barely enough for me to turn around. I pulled the rifle off of my shoulder and pointed it at the opening. I waited for the sound of crunching snow, the inevitability of this thing poking its face in here. I gripped my rifle like I was strangling it. I swore to myself I would fire every freaking round I had into this thing and for the first time in my life hang an animal on the wall. My thoughts felt empty, as if I wasn't sure I could pull the trigger when the thing came. I don't know how long I spent in there, or how many times I kept feeling like a Neanderthal, cornered in a cave, fearful of the unknown outside in the dark. By the time night fell I couldn't hold the rifle any longer, my hand cramped in a claw shape. It took me a few minutes to wrestle my coat off, as the small space had grown kind of warm. It took me even longer to convince myself I could set the rifle down and settle in for a long wait. I don't know when it happened, but I must have fallen asleep. That's when I felt something moving under me. I groggily sat up, exhausted. Again a small tug. My eyes shot up and in the pitch black I could smell something awful. It smelled like pennies were being crammed up my nose. The moment I made a noise I heard a ripping noise and felt the jacket torn out from under me. Some stupid part of me decided to reach out and grab at the jacket, and my fingers clamped onto fur, but not the kind lining my jacket. Tough, coarse, shaggy fur. I wanted to cry as I grabbed the rifle and fired off every shot I had into the place I thought the arm had come from. Fire, work the bolt, repeat. Nearly deaf as the muzzle flashes ceased, I mechanically continued pulling the bolt back and pulling the trigger. Over and over. I don't know why. I just kept doing it. All the way until morning. Clack clack click over and over. I found myself rocking back and forth when morning came. I waited another few hours, all the way until the birds started singing, and at the time they might as well have been angels. Pulling myself out of that hole I found pieces of my jacket littering the snow, and the few extra rounds I kept in the pockets were scattered about as well. Like a robot I picked up one of them, fed it into the rifle and shouldered it. I only needed one, because if the birds stopped I wasn't going through hiding again. I just hoped I wasn't going to be shaking bad enough to miss my own head. I don't even remember the walk back. It seems more like a feverish dream now. I got to my cabin, never looked past the broken door, I just got in my truck and drove. I swore to hell I was never going back there, but curiosity got the best of me. I came back with a few friends, who didn't know a lick of what happened, on the pretense that someone broke in and I needed some backup just in case they were still there. The only thing damaged was the front door, and the coat rack next to it. We cleared the house, made sure nothing was taken, and left. A few of them asked me why I wouldn't sell it to them, when I did put it up for sale the following summer, and I gave them some half-baked story about termites. I couldn't let anyone I know back in those freaking woods, but some small part of me wants to check in. The big game side of me wants to buy the biggest elephant gun I can fire without dislocating my shoulder, and take 5 or so friends to see what we find. The only thing stopping me is the little scared part of me that never left that shale cave, still racking that slide back and forth just waiting helplessly for the birds to start singing again.